Well, a video has emerged purporting showing the main attacker tossing a live grenade at security forces. A man in a black cap is seen taking it out of a backpack and throwing it at soldiers who had cordoned off the Parliament building. The suspect is in custody now. Well, this is what we know about him so far. These are the few details that we have. So he's 24 years old. His name's Igor Gumenyuk. He's a member of a pro-government volunteer battalion. He spent about 8 months fighting in East Ukraine and is a member of the Ultra Nationalist Svoboda party. Bye, Harry. Good to see you again. So, as we understand it, a parliamentary session is underway in Kiev right now. How is Monday's violence affecting that?
Well, we're seeing really the deepening of political tensions here in Kiev, and even one could say the development of some kind of political crisis for the ruling coalition party here. Now, after yesterday's divisive and contentious and dramatic first vote on those proposals for constitutional amendments that would give something of greater autonomy to those embattled eastern regions of the country, we have now heard the resignation of the Deputy Prime Minister of Ukraine. And to add to that today, also the announcement that the so-called Radical Party is pulling out of the ruling coalition government. Now, this could all go to ruin and destroy the integrity and viability of the ruling coalition. This is not great news for Poroshenko. Only yesterday he had to deal with this grenade being thrown at his officers outside of the parliamentary building, which of course killed 3 officers. He called those responsible for the violence as guilty apparently of terrorism, and he alleged that they stabbed the nation in the back. Now, also today a development, the release of another video showing apparently a far-right ultra-nationalist party leader also involved in yesterday's violence, or at least inciting at yesterday's violence. Now, the man in Oleg Tagnybok was captured in this video release today with protesters outside the parliament rallying. Fair enough. But he's then in the video seen going on to allegedly hurl abusive language at officers and then even directly get involved in the scuffles with them. Now, this is supposedly a party political leader, so extraordinary compartment on his behalf. Now, Tagnybok was also among the leaders of the Maidan violence, and so it's noteworthy here that he's been caught up again in such clashing as well. A clash, of course, in which 3 officers of the state were killed by shrapnel from a grenade. A noteworthy redevelopment for him, if you will. Now, so far as these far-right leaders and revolutionary leaders go,
this is the aftermath of a fragmentation grenade exploding meters away from the Ukrainian parliament. The suspect, a Svoboda party activist, the same ultra-nationalist group that co-led the fighting on Maidan and helped the revolution succeed. Since then, they've perfected the art of violent protesting. But President Poroshenko seemed to take little notice of heavy-handed tactics until they turned on him.
It was a stab in the back. How else can you describe the events after the vote in Parliament?
The champions of the Maidan revolution, former friends, now foes. The ultra-nationalist right sector has called for the removal of President Poroshenko.
We know perfectly well that the establishment and people in power in Ukraine will not change. But all of them should be thrown into the rubbish can of political history.
The darling of Maidan has similarly denounced the new authorities.
Discord in the Rada among people who were standing together during Maidan and now shout at each other while looking into each other's eyes is a shame. No reforms, restoration or development of the state could ever be completed in such discord.
With a common enemy gone, each of them now craves political power, often trampling their former allies in the rat race to the top.
There is a split within this coalition. Whether or not this split will grow depends on the personal ambitions of each political leader.
More than a year on, protests and politics remain a mortal hazard in Kiev, governed, it seems, by the law of the jungle, where only the fittest, the strongest, and the meanest survive.
There's a clear similarity between Monday's violence in Kiev and the unrest back in February 2014. The scenes of clashes and street fighting are familiar, with some of the same radical groups behind the violence. We asked several experts what role those groups are playing in current Ukrainian politics.
Revolution eats its own children, as someone once said. And the changes in Ukraine that took place 18 months ago were carried out on the back of a violent coup with the involvement of Western intelligence services. Now I think the same people who were involved in that kind of militant action are disappointed with the results and are not necessarily going to step into line with what Poroshenko wants or what people in the West want.
There's been a lot of different concessions made by Poroshenko administration to the right sector, Svoboda and other proto-fascist parties that apparently didn't go far enough as far as satisfying their demands. And when there is a political will, apparently it appears to be in Kiev, to meet the Minsk agreement determinations and stipulations, they're revolting against it because they're looking at this as a treason.
If you've been looking at the situation in Ukraine for some time, there's been increasing protests against the government by various right-wing groups. They're not happy with this whole peace plan, they're not happy with the economic situation, and they've got their own political issues with the government. The protesters themselves are prepared to go very far indeed. I think some of them would actually probably want to see the government change.